As expected, more information has come out surrounding the tragic passing of Doug Martin. This includes details of a 72-hour psychotic break back in August of this year, where Doug was said to have been outside of a rehab center, dancing with blood on his hands and face. To catch you up on the story, former NFL running back Doug Martin passed away over the weekend. He was in police custody after having broken into someone's home in the middle of the night. In the first video, I mentioned that the fact that Doug was relatively famous and made millions throughout the course of his NFL career, yet still, in his own hometown, decided to break into somebody's home, suggested that he was not mentally well. Obviously, not all of my little insights are always correct, but this one was true on a way deeper level than I ever could have guessed. A few months ago, back in August of this year, Doug wasn't on the beach chilling, enjoying his retirement. He was at this nice looking place that you're seeing on your screen. It's a treatment facility for drug and alcohol abuse. My primary source for this video comes from an article in the San Francisco Chronicle. David Hernandez and Eric Branch have done a phenomenal job on this piece, and I've linked that original article in the description. According to their report and several others, Doug struggled mightily with mental health and substance abuse. Between those two things, he was trapped in a destructive cycle that he just could not break away from. But during his most recent stint at a rehab center, Doug was constantly trying to quote unquote break out. During the first 48 hours at the rehab center, Doug left twice without permission. Then when he showed back up a couple days later, he tested positive for having cocaine in his system. The very next morning, the clinical supervisor pulls up to work to see the most disturbing thing. Doug was outside in the front driveway, dancing with blood on his hands and face. The supervisor called the police, saying that Doug had gone into a psychotic episode and that he was a danger to himself and others. The supervisor suspected, based on the evidence, that Doug had once again looked to escape the facility by jumping out of the second floor window from his bedroom onto the ground. She suspected the blood on his hands and face had come as a result of him literally punching the side of the building. Like maybe in his mind he was dancing because he felt he'd escaped the center. Maybe he punched the building as if it was his enemy. But you can see the kind of mental strife he was dealing with. So the supervisor walks into the building, gets up to Doug's room, and realizes it's barricaded from the inside. When they get in, they can see that Doug's window is open and the screen has been pushed out onto the ground. Later, two deputies show up and had Doug sit on a fountain. He complied but was, quote, extremely paranoid. He was concerned he was in trouble. He just kept asking if everything was gonna be okay. It really breaks my heart when people are trapped in darkness like this. I just imagine the fear and the loneliness they feel as they lose their grip on reality. And whether people know it or want to believe it or not, these attacks are also spiritual in nature. We don't never know what tomorrow might bring. So build a relationship with God now while you're of sound mind. The deputies asked Doug if he was armed, and he had a pretty ominous reply. He looked him in the face and was like, kinda. When they asked him to elaborate, he got super agitated and started to spiral. So the deputies are there and they're trying to explain to him, we have to pat you down before the paramedics can actually treat you. At that point, Doug complies, he stands up and he's prepared to be patted down. Before patting him down though, the deputies, understandably wanting to protect themselves, tried to grab Doug's wrist and handcuff. I don't know if that was a part of the discussion they had, but once they did that, Doug started pulling away and he knocks the deputy's hand off his wrist. And then the police punch him in the face, like literally, they punch him in the mouth and the nose. I feel like there's probably a couple of steps in between him knocking your hand away and you punching him in the face. But then the actual paramedics that are on the scene do what I feel like the police should have done. But you know, again, it said just 2 deputies showed up, so maybe they didn't really have the numbers to do it. But the paramedics on hand grab Doug, then the deputy pushes him, he falls onto the ground, and while he's down there, he's kicking the officer, and this whole struggle has really escalated. But eventually the deputies get him cuffed and he's finally subdued. They sedate him and the situation is under control. They found 3 small bags of cocaine in Doug's pocket, along with a 12-inch chef's knife that he was kinda armed with that was in his backpack. They also found a cocaine-coated $50 bill just floating in a fountain that he was sitting on. So either he tried to get rid of it before the police came, or he was still getting high as he was sitting on the fountain. After that whole ordeal, Doug was correctly deemed a danger to himself and others. Then he was placed on the 72-hour psychotic hold at a local center. As you can see, Doug's issues were way deeper than money. So the burglary call both is and isn't what it initially sounded like. Following that incident back in August, Doug had been doing okay for a little while. But then last week, unfortunately, things just began to ramp up again. On Friday, October 17th, Doug's parents came to his grandfather's house to help him. This is according to the family. Apparently, he'd been staying there at his grandparents' home trying to recover. So his parents came over on Friday, but then around 4 a.m. on Saturday, his family called the police and reported that Doug was having another mental health crisis. Doug randomly left his grandparents' home in the middle of the night and entered a neighbor's house at 4 o'clock in the morning. At this point, things are just getting scarier and scarier as his behavior is getting more and more erratic. He needed help and his family was desperately searching for months to find it, but nothing seemed to work. Doug just kept getting worse and worse up until his tragic demise. Police showed up and got into a brief struggle with Doug, and during that struggle he became unresponsive. He wasn't pronounced dead until he got to the hospital. A nearby resident, Matthew Johnson, said he heard a woman in his neighbor's house screaming before the sun rose on Saturday. He said he believed the woman was Martin's mother, who he suspects found out in that moment that Doug had passed. You can hear the pain in her voice from losing a child. From time to time on Substack, I'll kind of go through and check up on a few of my subscribers. I'll randomly just hit them up and ask them how life is going. Sometimes this leads to a brief interaction. Other times it might lead to a longer term conversation where we periodically continue to check up on each other through direct messages. It's a little community and support. The same day I posted my original Doug Martin video, one of my subscribers sent me a message. Again, we've spoken periodically over the last several months, so I know a little bit about him. I know that he's a military veteran who in the past has struggled with addiction and he still has his battles, but ultimately he's doing pretty well now. He's finding his purpose, he's gotten into some God-led therapy, and even though he's basically still recovering, he's already thinking about how he can help other people. But he told me that he was actually in a treatment center back around 2018, 2019. And according to him, also in that same treatment center was none other than our boy Doug Martin. He spoke highly of Doug, saying that he was really nice and respectable and honorable when he met him in person. At that time, he was in the treatment center under a different name, and he told people that he was an NFL trainer. If that's true, it means Doug has been struggling for years, and it only seemed to be getting worse as time went on. And all of these reports and stories and this information are all very consistent with what we've seen from players suffering with CTE. Doug's brain is reportedly expected to be studied by scientists to determine if he suffered from the deadly condition, which of course can only be diagnosed after a person passes. CTE has been heavily linked to drug and alcohol abuse, which can occur due to a variety of factors stemming from the brain damage itself. Symptoms like poor impulse control, mood disorders, and emotional distress sometimes leads individuals to self-medicate with drugs or alcohol, which can then escalate into abuse. And this can often lead to a vicious cycle where a person self-medicates to manage the issues they having, but the CTE ends up feeding into the drug use, and the drug use amplifies the CTE, and they can get trapped in it. And look, bro, I'm gonna end the video like this. Trials that we go through here are not forever. Do whatever you want to do, but I invite you to accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior so that when the day comes when you free from this body, you can experience eternal peace away from the pain and the suffering and trials and tribulations of this world. If you ain't messing with it, cool, I still rock with you. If you just entertained by the stories, man, cool, stick around. But at the very least, bro, just consider what I'm saying. And that's it for the video. I'm gonna catch y'all in the next one.